Hello and welcome back. So, if you want to make a guitar and you want to finish it and make it look absolutely perfect, like a guitar from the factory, that's going to require that you have some very expensive and special tools and that you have the facilities to make them. And not everyone does that. But you still want to make something that looks good and nice and, doesn't look like a hobby build in the garage look, even though it is. Well, the problem with lacquered guitars like this one that comes from a factory is that they have to be perfect. You have to get a super nice coat of lacquer on them, and you have to sand it back to get rid of all the orange peel and make a super flat glass-like surface, and then you have to buff it, and you need those big buffing wheels to get a really high gloss finish. And so it's going to be really hard to make those kinds of guitars, and they have to be perfect, because if you don't get it to be perfect, it's going to show, because everything gets amplified by 10 or 11 when lacquered. So I have some other ideas for how you can get a guitar that looks nice. And my first is to make a really nice texture of some sort, like I've done on this guitar, for example. Now, this might not be exactly what you're looking for, but you can experiment and come up with your own solutions. You don't necessarily have to do the same thing that I've done. And you can experiment with different colors and different finishes as well, like oil finish, for example. But this guitar is going to look really nice once I'm finished with it, and people are not going to be able to tell if this is something I've bought from a boutique builder or something. It's not going to be like a standard. People are probably going to see that it's not a standard thing, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's not professional. So you can definitely do something interesting like this if you want to, where you have all these different layers of wood and all these different layers of colors, and do something interesting. Another very interesting thing that you can do if you're starting out and you want to make something that is maybe more in the likes of this, is that you can make a Relic guitar, like the one I have over here. And the thing is that you can just scrape the finish off the words, and you can make these imperfections sort of a part of the look. Because you can see a lot of imperfections here when you look really close. Like you see a bit of the grain popping through the finish, and you see some of the high spots have been cut down to the bare wood, and other parts down to the undercoat that is underneath. And if you're not interested in Relic guitars, that's totally fine. You don't have to do this, but you can take inspiration from it to come up with something that you like. And also, it can be an interesting thing to do, because a lot of people actually do like Relic guitars or old guitars. And learning how to make a guitar that looks old is also a skill that can be really nice to know. So just because you might not like it yourself doesn't mean that it's not necessarily something that you need to learn anyway. Because what if you become a really well-known guitar builder and people want you to build them something that looks old and you don't know how to do it? So you might as well learn that skill. So yeah, I'm going to show you super quick an easy way to get a finish like this that is really easy to do and doesn't require that you have expensive tools, because that's really the problem. Like you can, like this finish, for example, and this guitar isn't really finished yet, so don't judge it too harshly, but the thing is that there are finishes that you can make if you have just like an operation in the basement or a very tiny workshop like I do, and you don't need all these expensive tools. So I'm going to show you how I did this finish, but I'm going to use some other colors, and hopefully this will inspire you to experiment. Like you can always take a piece of scrap wood and experiment with different things and see what happens to it. So an interesting finish that you can do if you don't have the tools to lacquer a guitar is basically you can take a wire wheel and put it in your drill. And you can go back and forth for a while over the piece of wood with the wire wheel. And what that does is it pulls away the soft grain from the hard grain. And it gets a very rough and coarse texture to it. But after we've done that, we can come back and you can go as deep as you want. We can come back with a stain, and I recommend you take something darker, like for instance black, like I'm doing here, and you paint that on. And you let it sip into the lines that you cut in the wood. Something like that. And now, when we come back and it's dried, we can take some sandpaper and we can lightly just take off the top. That would let the hard grain that wasn't removed get its original color back, which is a lighter wood, while the deep cuts that we made still has the color in it. It almost gives that sandblasted look that some modern Fenders have. And once you're happy with the amount of wood that you removed from the top and how much it's shining through, you can paint a nice color over, like a red color or a blue color or something, and it won't really affect the black color, because the black color, well, it's black. And then you can put an oil finish over or a matte lacquer or something, and then just knock the orange peel off with 1,000 grit sandpaper or something. And that's a very simple way to get a finish that looks somewhat professional. It's very hard, and you need a lot of tools and the right facilities to make something that looks like a factory finish. So if you don't have the options to do that, this is a very easy way to start out building guitars. I really hope this inspires you and gives you the positive feedback that you need to start building guitars if you've never done it, or to try something different out if you have never tried this but you've made a couple of guitars. Because it can be really disheartening if you've made a really nice guitar and then you spray paint it with spray cans and it doesn't look very nice afterwards, and you have to sand everything down and you don't know what to do. So this is just a tip on a really interesting way of doing it. Any guitar that you make some sort of texture on will be a forgiving finish for not spray lacquering it afterwards, because you're basically telling people this is how I want it to look instead of having a clear coat. Well, there's going to come more videos, so stay tuned for those. Have a nice day and build a guitar.